Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa Life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, SPA, is for Seek Power Always. You always have that power within you to lead the life that you were meant to live. Now, I am so thrilled about our next guest here, Matt Brauning. He is a best-selling author, a master trainer of NLP, which is Neuro-linguistic programming, and was a self-made millionaire at the age of 25. We got lots more to share about him, but I wanted to jump in and say, Matt, welcome to the show.
Diane, thanks for having me. It's been a great time so far this morning since you were just on my show, and now we get to turn the table, so super excited.
Oh, I just love it. I mean, I could talk with you for hours. I love that you speak and produce at workshops all over the world. And I mean, you're not just doing it here. You're doing like Australia, New Zealand, Fiji. I mean, you're on a plane all over the place, which gives you a different, unique perspective about life on the road and things how you share as a host of your own podcast. I mean, you are a top podcast person on iTunes, which is an amazing accomplishment, the Purpose-Driven Entrepreneur podcast. And, what's that been for you? I mean, how long have you been doing your podcast and what led you to do that?
So the crazy thing is the podcast I launched in February 2018. So as we're recording this now, it was only about 7 months ago. And so I've been doing live events for over 12 years, since 2006. And I love live events. I've done small ones, big ones, like I said, all over the world, 18 cities and 4 countries. And I feel like spiritually, I've been being led to have a wider reach. And it's been answered because now people are beginning to actually listen to it, which is just absolutely incredible. I love watching the charts, showing up next to Gary Vee and Tim Ferriss and Jocko and some of my heroes. And it's an absolute honor that, like I said, the listeners are actually listening to the Purpose-Driven Entrepreneur.
I love it. I listen to it myself. In fact, I was just sharing with you, I love that you go from some of the world-class entrepreneurs and having interviews with them, but you also have some practical hacks and tips. And one of my favorite was your hotel hacks about where you were talking about how to set up your hotel. And one of the things I was going to share with you is one of the things I do when I go into a hotel, not only do I move all the furniture and move all the literature off there, but I always bring like a pashmina. You can actually use a towel or anything and put it over the TV. Because that way you don't have like the electronics in your room and in your face. I mean, you talk about, covering up or unplugging like the alarm and the phone and those kind of things. But that's kind of another thing I do is covering the electronics.
So let me be clear. You said you bring a pashmina?
A pashmina, which is
I've never heard of that.
I don't see a lot of guy entrepreneurs doing that, but it's like, like a shawl. Right?
A shawl, okay.
Right?
Yeah, I have usually several shawls in my suitcase.
Yeah, or you can just use a towel from there. I like because it's pretty. So I also like to set it up where it's like looks nice. But I think there's something, I sleep differently in the room because I don't think you should sleep in a room that has a TV. That's just my own personal opinion. I think it affects your sleep. So just covering that, I just want you to try it next time to get like a robe from the room or a towel and cover your TV.
Diane, I'm bringing a pashmina. I'm gonna find one on Amazon and I'm gonna bring it just for you.
It makes a big, huge difference. So that's like my little hotel hack that I want to add to what you have going on there. So Matt, you're a movie star, right? You were in like The Journey with Brian Tracy and Bob Proctor. And then you also consult with Fortune 100 companies on leadership. And that goes, I mean, I just had a smile so much because you go anywhere from the US Bank, right, to, Ron Welty of the Offspring. I mean, a punk band. I mean, it's
you
like
an Offspring fan?
It's like maybe a few things back in the day, but it's a little hard for me. But I actually had somebody who I used to go to concerts with, and that's a whole nother story about, when you have like a Catholic girl with long hair and you go to a punk event where they want to cut your hair, it's like, whoa.
Wow. Yeah, I used to, when I was growing up, I definitely started getting into that around 16, 17, 18 years old.
Right.
And I was a very different guy back then for sure, but I loved all the punk rock scene and everything. And it's funny, when Ron came to the seminar, he came to one of my seminars, just invited by a friend. I had no idea who he was. He was just this, the guy named Ron. And it was about halfway through our advanced NLP training that someone said, "You know who that is?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And I've always been, a big Offspring fan, but that was pretty cool to teach a guy like that NLP. And whatever the company is, whether it's from US Bank to YMCA, the 4th largest nonprofit in the US, every single organization and every single organism has leadership inside them. and has a structure. We were talking about structures earlier before we were
Right.
rolling tape, structures that we need to drop in place to expand how we lead together, right? So whether it's leading your own body, leading your life, leading your family, or leading a Fortune 100 company, there has to be a leadership structure in place. And that's one of my favorite things to bring to people.
Nice, nice. So Matt, I mean, because there is such a diversity of who you lead and what you do, what's the through line? I mean, people are at different levels of their, business and where they're at. Are there any, common ground or some things that you like to lead with in your leadership where you're like, you know what, everybody needs this?
Great question. So if I looked at, again, everything from an organization to an organism, the through line would have to be vision and deep motivation. So a lot of people talk about, what's the why of why you do what you do, but it's a slightly different take. So like in my book, and I'm sure we'll talk about it at some point, but I wrote a book called The Firebox Principle. And the Firebox Principle is the idea of understanding that we all have this deep firebox inside us, right? Which, well, I'll tell a story later maybe, but the Firebox Principle is about the deep motivational drives that are oftentimes under the surface, that are hidden deep inside. So for instance, you might talk to a founder that started a company, and on the surface, they said, oh, I started it so I can make money. But deep inside, the real motivation may have been what I call the significance drive. It may have been because they didn't feel significant early on, or they wanted to leave a lasting legacy of their name in the world. They wanted to, show that they were just as important as their parent, who was also significant, things like that. And if you can get deep inside and understand the vision and the real driving forces, you have a chance to really align with it, and you have them come out in strong force and go much further in life.
That is so key. A lot of times I think people know like they're meant for more, like there's something bigger there to do. But let's say that, their firebox is in embers right now. Like they don't really know like what it is they're here to do. How do you uncover what that is if it's not obvious to the entrepreneur?
So specifically for the entrepreneur, where the firebox gets uncovered is from the origin story. Now, it's not the origin story of who I am, because the interesting thing is this is not a personality profiling system, right? So it's not like when I'm a significance drive person. It doesn't work that way. It's not like the Myers-Briggs or DISC or Enneagram or any of those types of things,
Right.
which are phenomenal in their own right. But I don't want people walking away with the book or taking the quiz thinking, oh, now this is who I am. Because the truth is, a firebox is contextual to each individual vision or enterprise you have. So you could have one particular fuel in your firebox for marriage. You could have a different one for a business you started. You could have a different one for volunteer work you do. You could have a different one in serving in church or in spiritual life or whatever you do for there. So
Right.
it's about looking at the context in life and, again, being aligned with what the true driving force is. Now, you can ask some questions, and we can certainly get into that. The fastest
Right.
way is just to take the Firebox quiz, and you can answer some questions. It's free, and you'll find out at fireboxquiz.com, fireboxbook.com/quiz. Let me say that correctly.
Right.
And you can find out exactly which is the driving force, your primary drive, versus out of all the seven.
I love the distinction in that because, a lot of times when, we take a lot of different assessments, people really like whole heart going, I'm this, right? And that's so rigid. And I think a lot of times, which is who you're being in the world, it's not like in concrete, it's in sand, and it can fluctuate and the environments can shift and who you're being is different. And, hopefully you have maybe a different thing that motivates you in like your, significant relationships versus your business, right? So I love how that came about. So how did you come up with this? I know there's like 7 different principles that are driving you in that. And how did that all come about?
Well, so for me, so this is my first new book in over 10 years. So I wrote my first book in 2007 around freedom from addictions. And that was a really important thing for me early on in life, and also early in my messaging as a leader. I did a lot of high school speaking and things with that book. And I've been thinking about a book for a long time. What about this? What about that? And I have all these ideas. I'm sure you do too. And I finally landed, this was something that instead of me creating this idea, I looked out of the world and I started getting really interested in origin stories. And like, I remember when I was 6 years old, I was, just barely turned 6. I was in kindergarten. And I remember going into that first day of school, and I'm standing behind this big oak tree, right? Just like standing behind it, looking out at all the kids playing. And I remember distinctly thinking, oh, I don't belong with them. Like, I don't know how could I go up and play with these kids? And it seemed to me, it seemed so weird that all these kids that didn't know each other necessarily just got together and played and they had fun. And I just couldn't do it. And that same vision, that same theme stayed with me all through school. Like in high school, I had one friend, right? One. And I never felt like I fit in. I didn't go to clubs. I wasn't on the yearbooks thing. I didn't do any sports. I wasn't in band. I literally, like under my name, it showed my picture, Matt Brauning, and then extracurricular activities, none. And at the end of school, I just felt like, well, I guess I just don't really fit in. I don't know how to belong with people. And what I found though is at 22, I started my first business. And that was the first time I ever remember in my life having people that wanted to be around. And what I realized is when you can carry a vision for something and you have this why and this big what, this big why, people will rally around your vision and want to support and want to be a part of something. So I always wanted to be a part of something greater, but I didn't know how to be a part of it. So I created my own. And when I created my first vision, people wanted to rally around that. And I was 22, 16 years ago, and I've never stopped building businesses. I'm on my fourth business now. Been doing this for 12 years. And, I have a team in place and volunteers and our students and like leadership programs in place. And so it was all about rallying around the vision is the point. And that's really so when I started rallying around the vision, then I looked and said, well, what do all these entrepreneurs share in common? What are the themes as to why they're doing what they did? And I realized that everywhere from an Andrew Carnegie to an Elon Musk to a Vince McMahon that founded WWE, pro wrestling, I'm a big pro wrestling nerd, to James Dyson that started the vacuum cleaner business. All of them had a different reason for creating the huge vision that they created. And of course, as you start to look after a couple of hundred of them, eventually they fall into categories and you see the patterns.
Right. Well, I mean, some of the things I'm hearing here, which I absolutely love, is first of all, you're not necessarily born an entrepreneur, right? Or you don't have like all the things that you garnished over the years and getting behind your vision and things that you started kind of as a loner in school. And, a lot of times when people see someone as successful as you are and getting out there and the longevity that you've been, in the fields, a lot of times people think that you were always like that. So I think it's so helpful for people to see that, this was part of the journey, right? To be able to see like, you stepped into it, right? And you stepped into something bigger. And then the other part is looking at, all the people you've talked to, that there's so many different ways of why people did it, but you found something where there was like 9 things that, was a through line, if you will, for people. And, I know that I definitely want to take it because I want to see which one I am and read the book on it. Or you already know, okay, well, who am I?
No, I don't know yet. I gotta find out your answers. Because the crazy thing about fireboxes, when you look at the surface, it could be anything, right? And you might make your assumptions, but it's not until you start to get into some of these people's quotes and into their stories and into like every superhero has an origin story, right?
Right,
but when you get into the deep origin story, that's where you can uncover, this is the actual motivation, the fuel, as it were, right?
Right.
Because every firebox it comes from an old steam engine, a locomotive. And, every old school locomotive that's a steam powered has this firebox in the center where you'd put the fuel in. You burn the fuel, it heats the water creates steam, and that creates momentum. So the fuel inside the firebox is what actually causes the locomotive to move forward. So depending on where you were in the world, and you'll love this because depending on the environment that you've surrounded yourself in is oftentimes how you choose your fuel. Like the Brits always favored coal, Americans favored wood, and we even use sugar byproducts, corn, all different fuels have fueled locomotives over the years. So the Firebox book seeks to answer the question, what do you put in your firebox? What fueled you to move this massive, whether it's a huge organization, or what fuels you to move your family forward? Or even yourself forward, right? As a vision or a visionary.
Right. I love that so much, and speaking about like what fuels you, one of the things we look at is, a lot of people just live their life by default. Like they're just letting things happen. And we like to have a conversation around, how do you live your life by design, right? Because, you are stepping into the world to design it versus default. So what are some of the things that you do to create what I call your spa life, about seeking that power within you and having that balance in the different areas? I know Firebox is a part of that.
Most certainly. So a couple of things that come to mind for that. So I love the life balance conversation. because depending on, it's just a really fun conversation because sometimes people are looking for balance. Sometimes people are realizing there's no such thing as balance. And like, how does that all work? So
Right.
for me, and this is just what I've seen, right? When I look at some of the most successful people in the world, and I mean success in all areas, whether they've created a movement, they've created a nonprofit, a company, they've been a stellar family person. When they've created success, it's almost always because they're out of balance. So to me, my spa life, right, just to get my personal answer, my spa life is about being so passionate about that area that you have a vision for that the rest is okay. Now, I don't think you should be unhealthy in other areas. If I'm neglecting my family, if I'm neglecting my health, that's a whole different thing. But
Right.
I can take care of my health at a decent level. I can take care of my family maybe for a season at a decent level, right? Like I'm there.
Right.
But maybe I'm going to push forward in this season of business because a lot of new things are coming out and I want to make a massive splash and impact.
Right.
Then I got to take the time if I'm really going to be this spa life person. I don't want to be a guy that 20 years from now, my son grows up and they say, "Hey, what was your dad like?" And he goes, "Oh, great guy. He wasn't really around much, but I really loved him and he took care of us."
Right.
I don't want that.
Right.
So if you're going to be out of whack, be out of whack temporarily through seasons. And then I'm going to come back and say, you know what? Like when my son was born, I took the first several years I worked less than 20 hours a week for, gosh, I think 6 or 7 years, like almost up until
Right.
now. Now
Right.
I'm working a little more, but he's also in second grade. So when he was a baby, he was a toddler. I was at home being a full-time dad, just like my wife was a full-time mom. I'd take my 3-year-old to the kids museums like on a Wednesday all the time, as much as I could. I was
Right.
out of whack. I was out of balance. I was out of balance to be the best dad and husband I could be.
Right.
And I've gotten through seasons where I'm out of whack to be super healthy and fit because it's time to get that in charge. So that's kind of my first take is be okay to be out of balance, but also be willing to see where you are and come
Right.
back into balance when you need to.
Right. No, I think that's an important distinction because it's not like you're balanced all in one day or even one week. It may be something like I love the analogy of using the seasons, right? Because there's different seasons. I mean, anybody who's built a business knows there's a season where you are focused and everything seems a little bit out of whack, but to know when to come back into that flow. I have one of my mentors, she uses an analogy. I love it, where she uses a Bosu ball, which is one of those where you stand on it and you have to kind of tilt your weight to actually stay balanced on it. And she uses the analogy in the different aspects of your life is that sometimes you need to push a little bit here. You're still up there. You haven't fallen off, but maybe you need to push over here a little bit to kind of keep it all going. It's not necessarily going to be the same all around, but you're maneuvering and massaging it around to make it all work. And so that's kind of
Love
what I
that.
hear what you're doing, which I think is really amazing because it's important, right? To make sure that, your family's doing well along the way and that your health is doing well along the way, but to know what that is for you. And I think for that to be a personal decision is really huge. So I love that. And, you and I have also talked about values. How does values come into how you're designing your life?
So I guess let me first define values from my perspective.
Yeah.
So I would simply say a value, a couple of things about values. Values are those things that are important to you, right? So it can be honesty, it can be time, it can be passion, joy, love, whatever it is, that would be a value, right? Something that you
Right.
value that's important to you. And values do two things. And this comes from our neuro-linguistic programming perspective as well. So I have a whole school called Evolution that teaches and certifies NLP and life coaches. And so in the NLP training, we do a ton on values. If your values are misaligned, you'll always know because they're self-sabotage. So you could have, for instance, as an example, you could be entrepreneurs. The number one value that I find that are in conflict with each other is freedom and success. So
Mm.
what you'll find is you say, why did you start your business? And 9 times out of 10, the most common answer for any entrepreneur, I've asked all sorts of rooms and all sorts of countries, everyone always says freedom in some level or not, right? To make my own schedule, to be my own boss, go where I want, sleep in on Mondays, et cetera, et cetera. The number two answer is success. And very often entrepreneurs are going to have both of those things important. So the question becomes, how do you quote balance those? And the reality is you don't. Not for a long time. So like what would happen if my number one value was freedom and my number two value was success? Well, here's what I would see. When you do behaviors that lead you towards more freedom, like when you take time off, you sleep in, you go on vacation, right? You take your kid out to the zoo on a Wednesday morning, that makes you feel good. because values do two things. They dictate how you're going to spend your time, and they dictate how you're going to feel about how you spent your time, right? So if freedom's number one, and I spend my time doing things that give me more freedom, then I'm going to feel good about my life and about my business. The other thing is, if freedom's number one, but you're working 80 hours a week, then you're going to be in conflict and you're going to feel terrible about how you've been spending your time, right? So the challenge becomes if you have two things that bring you in opposite directions, freedom and success. So if I want success, I need to do things that are usually opposite than freedom for actions. I'm going to maybe need to return those calls. I'm going to take on more clients. I'm going to send the emails. I'm going to be recording podcasts right here, right now. So both of us can have more exposure and teach more and meet more people. You know, we're doing the things that create success.
Right.
Now, one day this might create some more freedom for you and I, but it's not today, because today we're spending 2 hours back to back recording these awesome interviews together, right? So today doesn't feel like a freedom day, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And it's not bad. It's awesome. We're so grateful to do it. But this doesn't feel like freedom. This feels like really fun work, if that kind of makes sense.
Right. Totally.
So they'll conflict with each other. So what you'll find is this yo-yo phenomenon where you'll spend time doing freedom-y stuff until most entrepreneurs realize now they're not making much money or money gets tight. And then they go, back to freedom, back to success. And then they turn and they go back the other direction and they do all the work type stuff and they sell and they prospect and they meet people and they make calls and they go to seminars or whatever they do. And then they start making more money. And then now I'm getting more success. And then after the end of that season, whether it's a day, a week, or a few months, they go, oh my gosh, I'm working too hard. I haven't had a vacation in 6 months. So then all of a sudden, and I did that when I was in the mortgage business back before I was coaching and speaking. And I did it all the time. I would just yo-yo back and forth every 4 to 6 months, working my butt off and making money, and then feeling like I worked too much, so now I need to take a vacation. And then one year I snowboarded, I think like 50 times in one season. That was probably an exaggeration, probably closer to 30 to 40. But I was up every weekend and in the middle of the week as much as I could because I wanted that entrepreneur freedom life. So the answer is, in long form, I suppose, at this point, when you look at the values of the things that are important to you, the best advice I could say is choose the one that's going to be most important overall for today. If you could only have one, what would it be today? And then congruently, confidently go after that one. There you go.
So are you having kind of an overview plan though? I mean, because like you said, you could be like in conflict with each other. You're just saying don't have the conflict in the same day, like choose.
Definitely don't have the conflict in the same day. Here's like a great exercise, and you may have done this before if you've obviously been teaching and been around personal development forever, but not everyone runs into it. So a great exercise to do is elicit or discover your values. You'll actually have a whole list of values in order as well. So we probably have, I mean, if I said, Diane, what's important to you in a career or in your business, you'd say, oh, it's this. And then it's that, and it's that. And you'd end up with a list. And you realistically have a list of a couple hundred things, but you might only become conscious of, give or take, a dozen. I'd say most people can find somewhere around a dozen or so values. And then you want to put them in order. So maybe you say, well, let me just ask you real quick. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Can I turn the tables for a sec?
Sure.
So what's important to you in your business? What's the most important thing?
Experience.
And what else?
Connection.
What else?
Feeling good.
What else?
Learning.
So it's experience, connection, feeling good, and learning. Of those four, what's the most important?
Experience.
Experience. And what does that mean to you?
That my clients get to have an experience. I get to have an experience that there's some form of transformation that happens.
Perfect, right? Now here's what happens. And I'm not going to psychoanalyze you, don't worry.
It's all good.
And we've only done the top four.
Right.
But if we kept going, what sometimes happens is you'll have an entrepreneur that, says, I'm struggling with money. And then you find out success or financial freedom wasn't even on their top 10 or 15 list. Right. Or you'll find in a relationship, right? They say, I want this and I want that. But then you ask them, what's important to you? And they'll give you a whole list of things like honesty and faithfulness and trust and not abusing and not being mean and open communication. And their whole list is all a list built on what they haven't experienced, right? About their past relationships that were negative. And they say, what's important to me is to never have that. The challenge is what gets left off the list when you're focused on trying to get rid of the bad is the things you actually want. Like they didn't say joy. They didn't say passion. They didn't say love. They were too focused on not being lied to rather than having like just authentic conversations, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
So it's not so much about just pick the one, that's a shortcut, but really like get the whole list of values of what's important to you. Find out what the order is. So what's most important, what's next, what's next, what's next.
Right.
And then in NLP, we actually teach how to look through the list and find different types of conflicts. So like some conflicts like success and freedom, they're both positive, but they'll pull you in opposite directions.
Right.
Right? Opposite behaviors sometimes.
Right.
Another possible conflict would be something like, I want to be wealthy and I also want to make sure I'm never broke. And you might have literally your number 2 value is not broke and your number 7 value is having prosperity. And what people don't realize is that's pulling you, even though they're both going in the same direction, you want to have money both ways. The challenge, of course, becomes that emotionally, one of them is bringing you towards what you want. And the other one, the not being broke, is pushing you away from what you don't want. So you're having this, you're changing your head back and forth. You look one direction, you look the other direction, even though you want to move the same way. So there's different types of conflicts to have. I'd really suggest certainly to elicit your values. Say what's important to me, put the order, and then look and see if any of those are inherently negative or not values, what we call away from values, and then see if any of them, obviously conflict with each other.
Right. So if someone discovers that hey, I want to be successful, I want to have financial freedom and those things happening, and that's conflicting with something like, going snowboarding, how is it they bring those things into alignment?
Really good question. So this is where, depending on what your experience, your background is with personal development or spiritual development, again, whatever your shtick is, whether it's NLP, whether it's some kind of a different modality people use from seminars or coaches, whether it's going to a therapist, whether it's asking God to change it, whatever it is, right? You have your way. And that's where you start to work on things. So for instance, let's say I want to be wealthy, but I also have this value of not being broke anymore. And the not being broke comes from maybe I was a kid and I saw my parents fighting over a checkbook and I thought, man, I never want to be without money because that breaks up marriages. And I didn't think this consciously, but unconsciously, I certainly was aware of it, right? So what I might do is, so what do I have around the not being broke? There might be some fear. There might be some anger. There could be some hurt because maybe I watched my parents divorce. Now, I didn't, but as an example, right? Maybe a kid watched their parents divorce and sure, there was a lot, but in my little kid world, it was all around the money. So maybe I have hurt and sadness around not having money. So I need to find a way to do some process on that, do some coaching on that. And, we have NLP techniques, obviously. We have something I teach called time dynamics. You can do some of that type of work to get rid of the fear, to change the limiting beliefs, to change the decisions around it. What will happen is when you get rid of the stuff around that value, that not value will drop off. It won't become important anymore. So instead of walking around today being worried about being broke, that dropped off because I don't have the fear anymore. And if that drops off, I only have one focus, and that is, I do want to have prosperity. So you just go out congruently and create it.
Right. I love it. No, it's so important. I mean, so much that comes down to a decision. I mean, that's what I'm hearing is like, you know what, you decide this is my value. This is what I'm going after. And you put all the energy around that versus letting, it leak out into multiple things that aren't serving you. So what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. Making quality decisions is one of the most important muscles that we could ever build.
Right. Well, and speaking of quality decisions, one of the things I'd like to talk about is that the whole thing around busyness, like people having this busyness that's happening in their life. What are some of the things that, you get away from that? How do you answer that when people are saying like, I'm so busy? What are some of the things you do that you're actually, again, going back to, what's your secret to not being so busy, but you're actually being intentional?
Oh, that's easy. I just set up a 30-hour workday and no, I'm kidding. I just add the extra 6 hours or the 1 hour. I heard this recently. There's actually talk right now in the scientific community of adding a 25th hour to the day because the Earth's spin is actually changing, right? The axis is moving enough that the days are lopsided already, and we're getting closer to, at some point soon, we're actually going to need to add a 25th hour, and that's part of leap year and all the rest of the stuff. Right. But can you imagine what would happen? I just laughed out loud and I thought, what if everybody got their prayers answered and they got that extra proverbial 25th hour, and then we'd probably watch an extra hour of Netflix?
Right.
What's
Absolutely.
the point?
Yeah.
So we have to have a system for the other 24 first.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, we all have the same 24 hours, and you look at some of the things that people do in their time that are just like amazing, right? And then some people, they don't have even awareness around how they're spending their time and what that looks like. And I know you talk a lot about like segmentation is king. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's certainly a few different things that are really important for time management. And that's, I guess, where it would fall. Time management doesn't sound sexy, but it's really important
We'll
because
make it
that
sexy.
is, yeah, I mean, time management is literally life management. It is
Right.
life creation, right? At the end of our day, if we got our 24 bars of gold and they put it in your account and they said, you got to spend it all today, otherwise it's gone. And don't worry, I'll put more in tomorrow. So even with bars of gold, I think some of us would still get complacent and go, there'll be more tomorrow. But if you think about it as just gold, it's like, okay, I can spend it today on something. I can invest it in something. And if I do, I'll get to use it. If not, it gets wasted and thrown away. There's nothing more important. So
Right.
one of the things I do a lot is segmentation or compartmentalization. I found that's one of the most powerful tools in getting more things done with having less drama, less busyness and all that kind of thing. Having more peace in life is really what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So to me, it works like this. I look at categories in my life and I look at categories in my business, and I've learned that it's really important to switch on and switch off. So like I'm in a season right now where I travel a lot, right? We were talking about that earlier. I'm traveling about 2 weeks out of every month right now on the road. So it's a lot compared to, I think, most people. And what I find with that is when I'm traveling, I have to be able to segment and say, okay, I'm on the road. So what am I going to do? So like, for instance, all my personal development time is all on the road now because I have so much time in airports, at hotels by myself, waking up in the morning and so forth. And when I get home, as much as, hey, I could also read this book for an hour and a half, I'm not going to. I'm going to segment that off and say my personal development time is road time. My spiritual development time is first thing in the morning. My work time is here. And then I come back home and now I'm going to be switched on with my family. I'm there with my wife. I'm there with my son. I'm there with friends in town. And that's what I'm going to do completely. It even breaks down, forget about the traveling for a second. If you live in the same, you're home and you go to work and so forth. The simplest idea of not bringing your work home with you, not bringing the stress home with you. I will break up days of the week and even hours within the day, and I'll segment and put chunks of things in there, right? So like I'll take physical fitness, for instance, and you segment that into 1, 2, or 3 days a week, depending on, of course, what your lifestyle is. But if you could get a couple of days a week, and I put it all together. So I'll take maybe a Wednesday night. Here's a good example. Wednesday night, and I'm going to grocery shop and pick up my meal prep stuff. So I'll pick up chicken and this and that, salmon. I'll pick up all the veggies I want to do. And I'll pick that up on the way home from the gym. So I'm going to go to the gym at 6 o'clock. I'm going to work out at a class for an hour. 7 o'clock, I'm going to be a little bit sweaty. I'm going to drive home and stop at the grocery store and pick up my stuff. And then I'm going to come home. I'm going to chop it up, season it, put it all in the oven. And then that night I have a meal, but I also have meals for like 3.5 days. So that's just a concept of, hey, what if I took Wednesday night and devoted it to just maximize my physical health and energy, right?
Right.
But then what about date night? So I'm not going to worry if I'll talk to my wife, of course, right? I'm going to be with her, but I'm not going to worry if I don't have 3 hours of undivided attention with her that particular night, because that was a segmentation for health day.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Thursday night or Monday morning, right? I'm an entrepreneur. She's a stay-at-home mom, but Val goes to school. So maybe it's a Monday morning. We can spend those 3 or 4 hours together and just have what was the word I'm looking for? Undivided time, uninterrupted time with just me and her. So segment time for your significant other, segment time for kids if you have them, segment time for physical fitness, and segment time for work. And you might have different amounts of segments. All right, I might have a lot more work segments because there's a lot going on.
Right.
But if you have those segments, everything will get hit, and you'll create them on purpose, intentionally, rather than going through the week and then realizing, oh wow, I never had a date with my spouse. Oh wow, I never spent the time for XYZ.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I'm a big fan of the segmentation. I think it's like so huge. And because, if you notice this, if you give like a deadline for something, sometimes like people work like, and they'll do like just the last hour before, like they'll expand to the amount of time that they are given. So
Guilty.
if you start out, right? So, but if you have a segmentation that says, yeah, I could take a week on this, but I'm giving myself, an hour, you'll get it done. Like you'll make that happen in that time to have that happen, especially if you know there's other things going on. And I think particularly with kids as well, and as an entrepreneur, especially if they see you like working a lot of hours, I think if you have something on the calendar where kids see something like, hey, here's a staycation, or here we're going to go do this fun thing, like they get to see when their time is. I think that is really helpful for the whole family, because then they see what's a priority when you actually show that they are in the segmentation. It's when people aren't as part of it, I think is when things start popping up. So I love that you do that.
Yeah, and you could do it at a macro level too. When you talk about the kids seeing themselves in your calendar, you can, we'll do things like, hey, I know summer's coming and I know school's out, so let's front end load more family vacations and more fun and more of that stuff. We'll do something for the holiday time. But then I also know, hey, it's September or it's October. This is going to be a little bit more of a busy season for all of us, where you're going to focus on school, I'm focusing on work. But we still have a family night on Tuesday night where we're playing games and we're doing whatever we're doing. So it's you can always kind of look at a macro level and then look at a micro level too.
Right. Oh no, I love this so much. And, and I know that I love how you can just, when you're home, you're home. In fact, that's one of the questions I always love to ask my guests about, you can have a different experience in the different rooms that you have. Like you have a different experience in your bedroom versus your office versus your kitchen. What's your favorite room in your home and why?
That is such a good question. And the real answer is, so we moved to the Midwest, to Grand Rapids, Michigan 4 weeks ago. So currently I don't have a favorite room yet. I have, and we have like a pretty large house, because I was coming from California. Houses are like 75% off. So we have plenty of space, plenty of backyard and all that stuff. And now I have a basement. So I think the basement's going to become my favorite place.
Oh,
but
nice.
there's also a sunroom upstairs that's right next to the porch. So, but again, right now there's just boxes of books in there and no furniture. So once that gets set, I get a feeling that the sunroom is going to be the best place, because there's a lot of windows. I can sit and, do devotional reading and, read scriptures or read my favorite books or hang out with my wife. We'll have recliner chairs side by side. So I know I love that.
Nice.
But then also the basement, I can't wait to get that moving too. That'll be like the rumpus room, and have our Xbox set up, because I love to unplug from work and plug into, my son and I will play Xbox together, and we jump around on bean bags and, wrestle. And so I'm looking forward to that. So I think it's gonna be the basement and the sunroom for those two reasons.
Nice. All right. I'll check back in with you and see which one's winning the race of the favorite room that's going to happen. So, absolutely. Well, I know our time here is just going by so quickly. We're just talking about that. It's just happens so fast. And I definitely want you to talk about how people can stay connected with you. And I want to talk a little bit more, because in our few minutes here, about your book, about how they can get it. And I know that there's ways they can find out, which one they are. And let's just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, the easiest way to get a hold of me is I'm always on social media. My name's Matt Brauning. It's Brauning, Brauning. And it's at Matt Brauning on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you go, I'll be there and under my name. So that's easy. So, and I always say this, like really for real, reach out. If you heard me on this podcast, send a message, send a friend request. I'd love to engage with you. I'd love to connect and answer questions or just have meaningful conversation. I really genuinely like that. And then the second part is, if you go to fireboxbook.com, right there, fireboxbook.com, you can, if you wanted to, you can order the hardcover copy. You can check out the ebook on Amazon. I think it's still under launch pricing, which is absurdly low. And there's also, I put on a Firebox training on there as well. So if you go to the website, fireboxbook.com, you can pick with the book. And if you decide to get the hardcover book, you can use the little receipt code, and you can go get a $9.97 training completely free. It's not a webinar, it's not a sales thing or anything like that. It's just straight education. And it's me on video and audio teaching right through all of the principles of the book, the 7 drives, and giving my personal stories onto it, and a lot of entrepreneurial stories as well. So that's on there, and that's completely free for you. And then again, you can also sign up to get the quiz. I'm not sure when this will drop, but we're finishing the actual quiz itself. It's still in the works. We have the content done, but just working through that software system thing. So as soon as the quiz is ready, you can go fireboxbook.com/quiz, and you can sign up right now to get be one of the first people to get access to the quiz the moment it launches later this year, and find out which of the 7 drives is your primary drive, and it's totally free.
I love that so much. And we will put in the show notes all those links in case you're driving, you didn't catch that all down. But you're definitely going to want to pick up that book, and how generous that you're going to do a training with it. I mean, how many times you get a book, but then it's like, well, how do I use this? So I love that that's part of it. So you guys definitely make sure that you grab that at, the Firebox Principle is the book, and get the hard copy. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I like to highlight and turn pages over and have that happen. So I think that would be so great. And, just Matt, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and all your hacks.
Thanks for having me, Diane. It was a really, really enjoyable morning. Again, having you on my podcast, make sure you check out her interview with the Purpose-Driven Entrepreneur. And I certainly enjoy being with you. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, listeners, this conversation we have around spa life about having, that balance, and how it depends on how you define the balance, right? It might be, in one area you spend a lot of your time, and in other areas you might have a little bit less of that. We want to hear what you guys have to say about that. So as Matt was saying, whether you see this on, Facebook or iTunes or YouTube, any of those places, put in the comments and tag both of us, because we have, we're here to answer any questions that you have. We want to connect with you. We want to make sure that you guys are being supported in every way that you can. You can also go to the liferesetquiz.com, so you can also see where you're at with things. So we've got several quizzes for you guys to take. We're here to support you. Make sure you do that. And as always, live your spa life. Bye for now.